welcome to the Leading with Lean podcast. My name's Philip Holt, author of Leading with Lean, The Simplicity of Lean, and Leading Lean by Living Lean. And in this podcast, I narrate all three of my books, chapter by chapter, in which I share with you my over 30 years of experience as a lean leader across many companies globally. Leading with Lean, Chapter 3, Beginning the Change. Start with Why. Many readers will be familiar with Simon Sinek's Start with Why TED Talk and may have read his book of the same name. Simon mentions in his talk that he didn't invent this way of thinking, but simply codified it, though I do count myself as one of the many people grateful to him for rationalising an approach that was implicitly known but previously difficult to articulate, teach, or to set as a standard. This way of thinking is critical when it comes to establishing the case for change, as before we can determine what needs to change and how to do so, we need to understand why we exist as an organisation. What is our raison d'etre? Why does it matter that we exist? When we can articulate this well, we can then start to measure our current performance against that vision, and this will enable the agreement on why we need to change and allow us to communicate this to all parts of our organisation. Don't underestimate this, and do not fall into the trap of rushing this step, determining it in a couple of hours as either your own view, that of the CEO, or of the executive sponsor of the lean transformation. Instead, this should be determined in a workshop including the key stakeholders of the organisation. These will differ from one organisation to another, but could include such people as the leadership team or board of management, middle management, supervisors, union officials, employee representatives, customers. In the workshop, the group will align and agree upon the vision and mission of the organisation, the factors that influence its performance. Looking through the lenses of the customer, consumer, competition, and their own capabilities, they will create a compelling why to explain the organisation's existence. Most importantly, they will do this in a way that gains agreement across the key stakeholders. Once this is established, the team will determine the gaps between their current performance and the why, creating a case for change that can both motivate and sustain the organisation in the long journey ahead. An important element of the capabilities part is the effectiveness of the organisation in engaging and enabling its people. For those of us who subscribe to the theory of lean thinking, the people of the organisation are the only asset capable of continuously appreciating in value. I say capable, as unfortunately not all organisations create the environment for them to do so, but if your transformation is to be successful, this must be a leading part of the strategy. We must therefore ensure that the why of the organisation, as well as the case for change, is explicit in its explanation of the organisation's expectations of and commitment to its people. All of the above must be done on the basis of fact, determining our customers' and consumers' perceptions through data points such as NPS, Net Promoter Score, field call rates, relative market share, time to market, and QCD, quality, cost and delivery performance, in comparison to our competition, and an honest calibration of our own functional and technical capabilities. Communication, communication, communication. From the very first day of the transformation, communication will be critical to success. To prepare for the workshop in which we will establish the case for change, you should undertake thorough stakeholder analysis to understand who are the right people to include. In the workshop, you will also need to enhance the stakeholder map through alignment with the participants and agreement on the level of commitment and influence of the different groups. While doing this, you will ensure that you have sufficiently developed the level of granularity for the stakeholder groups, in some cases working at the individual level, for example with the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, or the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, and in some cases more generalised groups, for example the Product Engineering Group. The important thing is to ensure that the level of grouping of the people is sufficient to build and execute an effective communication plan. As we run the communication plan through the PDCA cycle, Plan, Do, Check, Act, or Plan, Do, Check, Adjust, we will continuously learn what resonates with our people. This is intended to create a dialogue with the organisation, not to broadcast to them. Gone are the days of simply posting memos on the notice board, corporate communication emails, or large-scale town hall meetings. These forms of one-way communication have passed their sell-by date and will not provide the learning environment that the organisation needs to be successful in its transformation, nor will they engage the biggest driver of change, the people who make up the organisation. Instead, a multi-channel two-way conversation is necessary, utilising both traditional face-to-face discussions amongst teams and more modern e-enabled platforms such as social networks. The balance of the tools used will very much depend on the size and scale of the organisation, with a small single-site business using in-person communication as much larger portion of their communication plan than a huge multi-site multinational organisation where in-person local communication will be augmented by social platforms, webcasts and intranets to provide the global connectivity and best practice sharing. In one of my earlier organisations, the most successful communication plan used was what we called the Philips Community, an enterprise social platform for sharing ideas, information, announcements and best practices, where groups can be formed and joined by any individual in the company. Whilst there is a level of corporate moderation to ensure that the guidelines of acceptable use are followed, it's fairly independent and it's populated through user-generated content. Of the many groups that existed, the continuous improvement at Philips Group was one of the most successful, which had over 2,500 members and had a constant stream of dialogue between members sharing, asking, answering and talking about their experiences. The level of attainment of communication was only reached through the development and execution of a solid communication plan and the utilisation of multi-channel communication across the stakeholder groups. In line with John Cotter's warning of declaring victory too soon, even when a high maturity is reached, the PDCA loop must continue if entropy is to be avoided. An ongoing dialogue with the organisation is crucial to our lean journey, and therefore sustained management of the plan is absolutely essential. Getting on the change curve. John Cotter is well known for his research and teaching in change management, which in more recent times has developed into an updated theory of change leadership. His model on change has detractors, and other theories and approaches exist. However, I found Cotter's change model to be extremely useful, and the lean transformation model that I will talk about in Chapter 5 utilises the thinking in the model to take the organisation through its journey of change. Like all models, it has omissions, as otherwise it would not be a model but would be reality and hence too complicated to apply. My advice is therefore to utilise the model, but to ensure that you are learning what works and what doesn't work as you progress. The communication plan will support this learning and the opportunity to adapt as you go. The elements of Cotter's model are mentioned throughout the book with the main coverage as follows. Number 1. Create a sense of urgency. Chapter 3 covers this with leading change. Number 2. Building a guiding coalition. Chapter 7 covers this with leadership activism. Number 3. Form a strategic vision and initiatives. In Chapter 3, Leading Change, we look at this. Number 4. Enlist a volunteer army. In Chapter 11, with Mosquito Leadership, we look at this in depth. Number 5. Enable action by removing barriers. In Chapter 15, Breaking the Mediocrity Barrier, we cover how to do this. Number 6. Generate short-term wins. This is covered in Chapter 5, Building the Transformation Model. Sustain acceleration. Chapter 12 covers this with coaching leadership. And then number 8, institutionalise the change. In Chapter 14, Creating the Lean Enterprise, we talk about how to do this. It's not my intention to try to explain Cotter's model in this book, as I wouldn't for one moment pretend to be as qualified as Dr. Cotter to do so. However, what I have done is demonstrated where these steps are critical in ensuring that your lean transformation and your role as a lean leader are successful. Cotter has enhanced his model over time, and in his ebook, 8 Steps to Accelerate Change in 2015, he observed that the rate at which our world is changing is increasing, but our ability to keep up with it is... Hi, Philip here. Sorry to interrupt the narration of this particular chapter, but I just wanted to remind you that all of my personal profits from the books go to charity. So if you would like to buy a book, it would really be helpful. Otherwise, if you feel that the podcast is sufficient, then please feel free to make a donation to my current charity, which is Women's Aid. It's a great charity which helps to stop domestic violence for women and children. Thank you. In the ebook, he speaks about some of the key challenges for organisations where Leading with Lean aims to support you in eradicating. First one being disengaged employees, disengaged from their roles, their colleagues, their managers and the customers. Second one being false urgency, consumed by constant activity and firefighting. The third one being complacency, lulled into thinking that what got us here will get us there. Number 4, lopsided organisations, focus more on management than on leadership. And then number 5, siloed, known more for boundaries than gateways. As you help to take your organisation through the lean transformation, they will experience the change curve as the above elements are challenged and the status quo becomes the enemy of excellence. Change leadership is therefore a large part of the lean leader's portfolio of competencies. You can't please all the people all of the time. One of my most important learning points of change was when I was visiting Omron during a Kaikaku experience. I'll cover Kaikaku experiences in more detail in chapter 10. This visit was in 2008, and there they talked about the 262 rule of change management, whereby for every 10 people in your organisation, you will have 2 enthusiasts who are advocates of the change, 6 passive members who are ready to move in the direction of least resistance, and 2 active detractors of the change who will be vocal in their disagreement of what is happening and can potentially disrupt the process and take the passive group in the wrong direction for the organisation's transformation. The advice that our group received was that we often spend too much time on the detractors, expending a lot of time and effort in an attempt to convince them that they should come along with the change. However, the time spent with this cohort is time that you are not spending with the other 80%, and the most effective use of our time is to work with the advocates for change to bring along the passive team members. We must, of course, be careful not to completely ignore the detractors, but some form of isolation as a result of their non-involvement in the successes that we create with the majority can, and in my experience will, bring some of them along. Nevertheless, be prepared for the fact that for some, the direction of the change will not suit them and they will need to move into pastures new. In this case, wish them well and accept that you can't please all of the people all of the time. Along with the leadership team, you must establish the strategy for managing the few exits that you will have, especially where it might be a person with a strong influence through position, character, or simply length of service. I'm not intending to give you the impression that lean transformation will result in an increased attrition rate, as in fact it's normally quite the opposite. However, change creates uncertainty, and no matter how well your communication and change leadership is run, some people will be disaffected and will ultimately leave. And then any attempt that you make to keep everyone on board, regardless of their resistance, will result in an overload and ineffective change leadership and will stall or significantly delay the transformation. As a lone violinist, you must accept that not everyone will stop to enjoy the new theme tune of the organisation, regardless of the efforts that you put into change leadership. Your advocates for change will be your most potent allies, but the trick is to convert them from advocates to activists, which I will discuss later in the book. When you gain their activist engagement, they will bring the passive employees rapidly along. Engaging employees. Earlier in this chapter, I mentioned the importance of engaging employees, our colleagues, in the why of the organisation. Change leadership is ultimately about getting the vast majority of the organisation to embrace the vision and to make it happen through a significant change in behaviour and, ultimately, the culture of the organisation. The lean leader is fortunate in the respect that lean thinking, unlike the vast majority of transformational approaches, requires that the people who do the work, and not a group of business improvement experts of some form, are the ones to change the way that it is done. There is an absolute need for lean experts, and I will cover this aspect later in the book. However, the lean experts are not going to make the change in the ways of working, but will rather help to enable the team members with the thinking and tools to change it for themselves. It may be a cliched metaphor by now, but this really is the difference between giving a man a fish and teaching him to fish. However, there is an unfortunate challenge to be overcome in this regard, as it takes longer in the short term to do it this way than it does to simply get in there and make the change. Nevertheless, it's the only way to sustain and maintain the results and to then be able to build on them through continuous improvement. For most organisations, there is no way that they could possibly recruit sufficient numbers of lean experts to do the improvement work, nor could they or afford to have them on the payroll. This is both impractical and ineffective when compared with the lean thinking approach, which is to have the people doing the work trained, certified and practicing as lean practitioners and, through continued practice, becoming lean experts in their own right. The lean transformation approach will therefore need to have this engagement built into it through the development of its people by training, coaching and certification as lean practitioners. This competency will be built at the Gemba as they implement daily Kaizen and participate in Kaizen events on a regular basis. In the lean transformation of the Philips consumer lifestyle manufacturing sites, through the deployment of the approach outlined above, employee engagement scores measured independently by an external provider were raised from levels of around 50 to 60% to over 80%, and in most cases above to what was considered the high performance norm. Engaging the leadership. As mentioned above, one of the issues that the lean leader will face is the slower relative progress that they will make with the lean thinking approach in comparison to an expert-led project approach. Getting results through our people instead of for them through expert improvement resources takes more time, and we therefore need to utilise one of the guidelines of Kotter's model and focus on some quick wins. One of the best ways to do this is to take a model value stream approach, whereby we focus on a value stream or a part thereof which is complicated enough and of sufficient scale to demonstrate that lean thinking works in our organisation. However, what we're looking for is a model area that is small enough still to demonstrate our results in around 6 months' time. Around 3 months to actually have made some initial results, but around 6 to 9 months maximum to have actually proved it beyond doubt. Linking this back to the why, the model value stream must address the case for change and the vision of where we need to get to, and must deliver against the metrics that we have established, such as improving time to market, gross margin, quality, cost, delivery performance, or whatever really matters to the business and will compel our leadership to become engaged in this transformation. Whilst you have been deploying the model line, the 262 rule talked about earlier will most likely have been a reality in your leadership team itself, and this will be a watershed moment for the transformation. This isn't working in isolation from the engagement of the general population of employees, as the model value stream approach is designed to engage both the people involved in the model value stream, but also those that are not involved, as they see the improvements for their colleagues and start to wonder when they can become involved also. It is at this point that we're starting to move our deployment from push to pull.